In a world that treats attention like oxygen, you're told to be seen. Post your wins. Announce your plans. Showcase your success like a trophy wall. The creed of our time says exposure is power. But what if that's the trap? What if the fastest way to lose your edge is to put it on display? Niccolo Machiavelli, often painted as cold and ruthless, was first a watcher. He studied power the way a surgeon studies anatomy, precisely, quietly, without sentimentality. And what he kept seeing over and over was simple. The people who flash their strength too early become targets. The peacock is beautiful, yes, but it's also easy to spot. The truly powerful don't trumpet their might. They let others feel it, usually when it's too late to do anything about it. Look at Renaissance Florence. Power wasn't a crown you wore in public. It was a dagger you kept hidden under the robe. Men died because they loved their own echo. Rulers fell because they couldn't resist the urge to show everyone how untouchable they were. Machiavelli learned the pattern. Strength that needs to be seen isn't strength, it's costume. The strongest man in the room isn't the one filling the air with words. It's the one who watches, measures, and waits, while the performers tell on themselves. And yet, what do we do now? We announce our goals before we've taken a single step. We post victories in real time. We reveal our strategies, our moods, our relationships, all under the banner of authenticity. Here's the problem. What we call authenticity is often just strategic self-harm. In power, the loud become predictable, and the predictable become vulnerable. Machiavelli put it cleanly. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few feel what you actually are. That's not encouragement, it's a warning. The more you reveal, the easier you are to categorize, defend against, and, if necessary, destroy. In the court of power, mystery isn't a flaw, it's armor. Think about the founder who brags about a product while it's still half built. Competitors copy, undercut, or sabotage. Think about the person who dominates a meeting with speeches and self-praise people nod, but their respect quietly drains away. Now picture the one who speaks rarely, moves decisively, and lets outcomes do the talking. That person doesn't need to be loud. Their presence shifts the room. Why does this happen? Because speech is commitment, and commitment, too early, is self-limitation. The moment you speak, you draw a map of your position. You're telling the world where your weapons are. Once you do that, other people start building countermeasures. Machiavelli understood the power of being underestimated. The fox survives by hiding its cleverness until the last second. The lion rules not by roaring non-stop, but by what the roar implies when it finally comes. Modern life confuses noise with dominance and posts with presence. But the truth is harsh. The more you show, the more you owe. Visibility creates debt. It trains the crowd to expect a performance. Miss a beat, and they remember. Stay silent, and you move without a tab. This isn't just theory, it's psychology. People rarely fear what they fully understand. They fear what they can't predict. Put your every move on display, and you become explainable, which is another word for controllable. Hold back, stay calm, and let others guess, and they'll reveal more about themselves than you ever reveal about you. Machiavelli would take one look at our era of performative success and shake his head, not because he's anti-ambition, but because he knew how fragile ambition becomes when exposed too soon. He wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." Translation: your past statements turn into chains. Your public declarations lock you into yesterday's version of you. Once people expect you to be a certain way, any pivot looks like weakness. Silence breaks those chains. Silence gives you the right to evolve without apology. Those who last understand restraint. So imagine two fighters entering the arena. The first boasts before the match, talks up his victory, feeds the crowd. The second walks in quietly, looks his opponent in the eyes, and says nothing. Which one makes your stomach drop? We don't fear the loud. We fear the unknown. Here's the painful part. When you show off your money, your body, your partner, your plans, you feel like you're winning. You feel like you're intimidating people. In reality, you're placing targets on the exact things you flaunt. You invite envy that becomes action. You invite resistance that becomes sabotage. And worst of all, you train yourself to depend on external validation like a daily drug. Machiavelli warned, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." People love to misread that. He isn't telling you to become a cartoon villain. He's telling you that fear, the respectful kind, needs distance, ambiguity, and restraint. Bravado kills all three. The desire to be admired is a seed that grows into self-destruction. Tie your worth to other people's eyes, and you will start optimizing your life for applause. You'll chase optics over outcomes and wonder why your results feel thin. So, what's the alternative? Become unreadable. Move in silence. Execute without announcement. Speak when words add weight. And only then, let your results deliver the message. This is not cowardice. It's control. Control of your narrative. Control of what your rivals can and can't know. Control of when you reveal and when you conceal. Machiavelli never preached hiding out of fear. He preached revealing only what serves your end game. Influence isn't about being seen, it's about being felt. Quietly, sharply, permanently. So the next time your thumb hovers over post, pause. Ask a brutal question. Who benefits from this reveal? You or the people who now have a blueprint to attack, copy, or corner you? The strongest forces in nature, gravity, time, pressure, shape mountains without making a sound. Be like that. Be still. Be sharp. Be silent. Because the man who speaks before he moves gives his enemies time to plan. He becomes a map visible, traceable, predictable. And once you're predictable, you're manageable. Machiavelli's insight was never just political. It was deeply psychological. Power doesn't start with dominating others. It starts with self-control. And the core of self-control is simple: knowing when to withhold. Why do people show off? Certainty, approval, proof that they matter. The Machiavellian mind doesn't chase proof, it cultivates leverage. And nothing creates leverage like chosen silence, calibrated, deliberate, dangerous. The higher someone rises, the less they talk. The heavier their words become, the rarer those words appear. When they speak, people lean in not just for what's said, but for everything deliberately unsaid. Beginners explain. Masters don't have to. That's the difference. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. The position doesn't create the power. The person does. And that power is forged through restraint in speech, in reactions, in the urge to defend your ego. Show-offs are easy to bait. They bite on every insult, spill on every provocation, and hand you the levers to pull them apart. The strategist doesn't flinch. He doesn't explain. He doesn't argue for claps. He plays for position. Look at the truly influential people you know. Are they the loudest in the room, or the ones whose silence makes the air feel heavier? That sensation you feel around them has a name: strategic invisibility. When you're loud, people track you. When you're quiet, people imagine you, and what they imagine is almost always bigger, scarier, and more powerful than what's real. Visibility limits you. Imagination amplifies you. That's the first shift. Step out of the performance. Step into the shadows by choice. Not to hide, but to control the reveal. Here's the paradox most people miss. The more you're seen, the less you're felt. That's why kings once hid behind veils and emperors appeared only on rare choreographed occasions. They didn't do it because they feared their people. They did it because they understood perception. If you become common, you stop being compelling. Power leaks when presence becomes routine. Modern life bulldozes that principle every day. We hand out our private lives like flyers. We tell strangers our goals, our doubts, our income, our relationships, and then we wonder why respect is scarce. Respect requires distance. Mystery is not absence, it's staging. It's the discipline of shaping what people see and when they see it. Machiavelli warned that men judge more by the eye than by the hand. Translation: what they think they see matters more than what you actually do. If you show the entire process, the hesitation, the false starts, the half-finished draft, you dilute the magic of the result. A magician who explains his trick kills his own power. Your achievements don't hit harder when you narrate them. They land softer. Every word of justification weakens the impact. Every extra detail gives critics something to dissect. Every boast moves attention from the outcome to your ego. The disciplined operator flips the script. He doesn't announce victories. He multiplies them quietly. He lets people connect the dots on their own. He encourages rumor, invites speculation, and feeds mystique with restraint. The less you explain, the more they lean forward. The more they lean forward, the more leverage you hold, without ever raising your voice. This is not a call to vanish. It's a call to be surgical with visibility. Step into the light at chosen moments, not craving ones. Make appearances rare, deliberate, and loaded with intent. Think of the lion. It doesn't roar all day. It watches. Then, when the roar finally comes, it carries meaning. The real danger of showing off isn't only that it exposes you, it reshapes you. Slowly, you start performing instead of acting. You prioritize applause over outcomes. You tailor your decisions for reaction rather than purpose. Over time, you become a caricature of what once made you dangerous. That's the showman's trap. Once you're addicted to the audience, you become their servant. They pull the strings with likes and attention. You dance. Mystique is the antidote. And mystique is not hiding, it's restraint with intent. It's showing only what advances your position. It's saying less but signaling more. It's letting silence do the heavy lifting. Want to build mystique? Start by removing the need to prove. Replace display with discipline. Act without explaining. Win without celebrating. Stop narrating the process. Debut the final cut. Do that, and something interesting happens. The world begins to come to you, not because you shouted, but because your absence speaks. In a culture addicted to noise, the quiet figure feels gravitational. People project their hopes, fears, and theories into your silence. They do the marketing for you, and their imagination, not your words, expands your presence. This is the quiet war. Machiavelli fought in every line. Control over fame, not romance with it. Influence without dependence on applause. In an age where every platform demands you speak, those who master silence become gods among noise. The truly strong are not the ones begging for attention. They're the ones who don't need it. There's a second-order benefit to silence that people overlook. It flushes truth out of others. Every boast is a confession. Every overshare maps a weakness. Every impulsive explanation draws a target on your need for approval. Loud men broadcast the coordinates of their vulnerabilities. Quiet men collect those coordinates and store them. History is brutal on this point. The flashy are outmaneuvered by the patient. The performers are beaten by the planners. The ones who insisted on being understood were handled by those who preferred to be ungraspable. Remember this: being understood isn't always valuable. In power games, it's often the opposite. The moment people fully grasp you is the moment they stop respecting you and start calculating against you. Machiavelli didn't write for people who want to be liked. He wrote for people who want to last, and to last, you must be difficult to read. He advised the prudent man to study the greats and imitate what made them supreme, not their style, but their discipline of concealment. Caesar crossed the Rubicon in silence. Cesare Borgia announced nothing until his enemies were already boxed in. Even Machiavelli himself layered his hardest truths in implication and allegory rather than loud instruction. These weren't theatrics. They were tactics. We forget that surveillance today is mostly self-inflicted. It's not just cameras and governments. It's timelines and feeds. People volunteer the exact ammunition needed to attack them. They share the weakness. They publish the pressure points. They make it easy. Once released, your information doesn't belong to you anymore. You can't control the story after you give it away. So build what Machiavelli would call fortresses of the mind, private inner strongholds where your true intentions live, locked and guarded. Your aims are not for display. They are for execution. Your process stays invisible until the result is undeniable. That's not paranoia. That's design. Architects don't show unfinished plans to critics. Generals don't telegraph strategy on the eve of battle. Kings don't ask the crowd for permission before they act. In power, anticipation beats exposure. The unknown is leverage. A quiet room holds more tension than a loud one. The unsaid shapes behavior more than any speech. Your job is not to control everyone. It's to control what everyone is allowed to know. That's where the average man fails. He feels tension and rushes to relieve it. He feels doubt and tries to drown it in words. He feels triumph and can't resist shouting. In doing so, he hands the world a decoder ring to his psyche. The dangerous man resists. He learns to hold the note. He sits in discomfort without flinching. He declines applause that would cost him position. He speaks only after silence has finished its work. This is not passivity, it's precision. Quiet isn't the goal. Unreadability is. Mere quiet can be timid. Unreadability is active curation. You leave just enough gaps for people to fill with their own anxieties, and those anxieties push them to misjudge, overextend, and reveal. Look across eras at the people who shaped outcomes. Churchill, when it mattered, kept his words crisp and spare, each one landing like a hammer. Marcus Aurelius wrote for himself, not for spectacle discipline inward, power outward. The best modern CEOs listen more than they speak in the room. They are not performers. They are players. Their silence is not absence. It is pressure. Machiavelli saw through the decorations of charisma. Applause fades. Fame is a fragile shield, but a composed mind, concealed and controlled, that doesn't crack. Ask yourself, in a world full of performers, what happens if you refuse to perform? If you stop explaining? If you decline to show process? You gain space to think, to maneuver, to act on your timeline instead of the timeline of watchers. Then the dynamic flips. People start talking about you instead of to you, speculating instead of interrogating. And while they do, you move. Quietly. Exactly. Without asking permission. That's how you build something durable. With moves that can't be anticipated. Not posts that can be applauded. With vision that doesn't need validation to stay alive. Machiavelli would put it plainly. To rule without resistance, first surrender the need to be seen. Let others chase spotlights until they burn. You stay in the architecture, the place where levers live. When they finally notice, it's because the move is already made. They won't know how you did it. They won't even agree on when. All they'll agree on is that it's done. There's a law of nature that rarely fails. The loudest animal is almost never the deadliest. The wolf doesn't bark before it bites. The serpent doesn't hiss before it strikes. The storm doesn't announce its arrival. It simply arrives. Machiavelli understood that silence, when used deliberately, is not passivity, it's precision. Every moment you choose not to speak, not to reveal, you build pressure in the minds of others, and that pressure, that uncertainty, is power. He wrote endlessly about how rulers fall not because they lack force, but because they misuse visibility. In the modern world, noise has become the substitute for strength. We post every move, document every win, broadcast every emotion. Life has turned into a theater of exposure. But performance is not power. It's what you do when you've run out of it. Those who truly hold power never need to prove it. The moment you try to prove something, you silently admit you doubt it. That's why showing off is the worst thing you can do. Because it invites reaction. It tells everyone where to aim. It reveals your strategy before the first move. And in Machiavellian terms, that's not just a mistake, it's malpractice. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The fool can't resist showing himself, seeking recognition, demanding to be seen. The wise man acts quietly, decisively, and lets the world find out later, if ever. Understand this. Silence isn't timidity, it's supremacy. The silence of someone who doesn't need to rush, doesn't need to validate, doesn't need to be understood. Because the man who shows off has already lost control. His power is no longer inward, it's externalized. He's chained to the crowd's gaze. He needs them to see him, to feel real. And once that need exists, it can be manipulated. That's the trap. The moment you start performing for an audience, you start moving on their schedule. You no longer act when it's right. You act when they're watching. You stop strategizing, you start reacting. You mistake reaction for result, applause for progress. It's how great plans die not from opposition, but from overexposure. The idea shared too soon, the goal announced before its time, the victory flaunted before it's secured. In politics, in business, in life, that's called premature commitment. Machiavelli would call it fatal. People think confidence means being loud. Machiavelli would disagree. True confidence is silent. It doesn't explain, it executes. It doesn't ask for trust, it demands respect through results. Look at leadership through this lens. The loud leader, the one who justifies every move, who responds to every critic, may appear strong but feels fragile. The quiet leader, the one who listens more than he speaks, commands presence. His words weigh more because they're rare. That's not coincidence, it's design. In fact, silence multiplies value. Every unnecessary word is a discount on your worth. The man who constantly explains himself drops his price. The one who withholds, who lets others wonder, raises it. You can see this principle everywhere. In negotiation, the first person to fill the silence loses ground. In conversation, the one who resists the urge to react controls the tempo. In conflict, the one who waits learns the most. When you reveal too much, you surrender the initiative. But if you hold your silence long enough, others will reveal themselves. They'll fill the space with their own insecurities, their own tells, their own weaknesses. Machiavelli's genius was that he didn't just study politics. He studied human nature, and human nature is uncomfortable with the unknown. The more someone can't read you, the more they talk to fill that void. And in doing so, they hand you everything you need to win. So, before you share your goals, before you broadcast your plans, stop and ask, who am I really doing this for? Progress or praise? Control or comfort? Because the man who must be seen will always be controlled by the gaze of others. But the man who sees everything while revealing nothing, he becomes untouchable. His invisibility isn't weakness, it's insulation. That's what makes Machiavellian silence so rare. It demands discipline, the ability to delay gratification, to resist applause, to find satisfaction not in being known, but in being unknowable. The predictable can be managed. The mysterious must be respected. Power, at its core, is psychological. It's the hesitation you create in others. When people can't predict you, they brace themselves. When they can't read your intentions, they assume the worst. That assumption keeps them cautious. That caution keeps you safe. This is why Machiavelli said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." Because fear is built on uncertainty, while love is built on familiarity. Familiarity makes you common. Uncertainty keeps you above reach. Fear, when crafted not by cruelty but by calculation, creates distance. And distance keeps you powerful. But modern culture trains us to do the opposite. We overexpose ourselves for connection. We confuse transparency with authenticity, and authenticity with strength. We tell the world everything and then wonder why it feels like we're losing control of our lives. Machiavelli would call this self-inflicted sabotage. Every truth you release is a piece of leverage you give away. Every detail you share becomes something that can be used, twisted, or judged. Power is built in the unseen, the part of you the world can't dissect. That's why restraint is not repression. It's architecture. When you hold back, you aren't hiding. You're designing perception. You're deciding how you'll be interpreted, what people will project onto your silence, and what story they'll tell in your absence. In that story lies influence. The average man hates uncertainty. He wants to be liked, understood, validated. So he overshares to relieve tension. But the disciplined man learns to live inside that tension, to use it. The silence he holds becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, others reveal themselves. They project their fear, their envy, their insecurities onto him. And while they're busy guessing, he's already 2 moves ahead. That's the art of unreadability. It's not just about shutting up. It's about creating calculated fog. Enough to disorient, not enough to confuse yourself. A man who is merely quiet can be overlooked. A man who is unreadable cannot be ignored. People talk about him, debate him, fill in the blanks, and all that energy feeds his presence. That's real power, to be everywhere without being fully seen. Look at any figure who shaped history. They all mastered restraint. Marcus Aurelius kept his thoughts private, not public. Churchill used silence to make words thunder. Even modern leaders, those who truly influence markets and nations, speak less than the people analyzing them. They know that noise is liability. Emotion is liability. The desire to be admired is the most dangerous liability of all. Because once you need applause, you'll compromise your strategy to keep it. That's why Machiavelli valued silence over spectacle. He knew charisma fades, applause dies, and fame demands constant feeding. But a man who controls himself, his words, his reactions, his need for attention, that man can't be manipulated. He's a moving enigma in a world of open books. So the question is, in a society that rewards noise, can you stay quiet long enough to become feared? Can you resist the itch to prove, to show, to share? Because every second you stay silent, your power compounds. Every word you withhold becomes weight. Every move you make without explanation becomes legend. That's the silence of supremacy. The quiet that commands more than shouting ever could. The stillness that pulls attention instead of chasing it. When you can master that, when you can let silence speak for you, you've crossed from performance into power. Machiavelli's world was full of performers. Princes who flaunted their armies, leaders who broadcast their brilliance, men who wanted to be worshipped instead of obeyed. And every one of them fell for the same reason. They became predictable. The moment you can be read like a book, someone starts writing your ending. That's the core of his psychology. Power isn't about domination, it's about control. Not of others, but of what others are allowed to know. When you manage perception, you manage possibility. And silence is the most flexible tool in that arsenal. The ordinary man hates that silence because it forces him to confront uncertainty. He fills it with words, movements, explanations, all in the hope of easing discomfort. But every explanation gives away data. Every unnecessary motion reveals your rhythm. Machiavelli's operator doesn't ease tension, he weaponizes it. He lets the unknown do the intimidation for him. The modern man posts his entire life online, his routines, his goals, his thoughts, his pain, thinking it builds trust or authenticity. But in truth, it builds exposure. It arms your rivals. It gives strangers a map of how to hurt you. Machiavelli would look at social media and call it the world's biggest intelligence leak. 1 billion people volunteering their vulnerabilities in real time. He would tell you to build something else, what he called fortresses of the mind. Private strongholds where your intentions, doubts, and ambitions remain yours alone. Your thoughts are not for consumption. Your process is not for public commentary. You build behind closed doors until the outcome forces acknowledgement. Those who build in silence build stronger. There's a reason architects don't show blueprints to critics halfway through construction. There's a reason generals don't tweet their war plans before the battle begins. There's a reason kings don't ask the crowd for permission before they rule. In power, anticipation is more valuable than exposure. The unknown is leverage. The quiet room holds more gravity than the noisy one. The unsaid word carries more weight than the shouted one. The Machiavellian doesn't aim to dominate every conversation. He aims to shape what is left unsaid. He doesn't just control people. He controls information flow. He knows that mystery guides behavior more than speech ever can. The average man, by contrast, betrays himself constantly. He feels tension, so he blurts. He feels doubt, so he over-explains. He feels triumph, so he announces. And in doing so, he hands everyone else the code to read him. The dangerous man, the one who wins, learns to hold the silence like a sword. He resists the impulse to justify or to celebrate. He sits in the discomfort until it becomes his weapon. His calm unnerves people. His restraint makes them second-guess. His stillness creates motion in others. That's the paradox. By saying less, he makes others speak more. By moving less, he makes others reveal their position first. That's why silence isn't passivity, it's pressure. You become the mirror that reveals others to themselves. People fill in the blanks with their own fears, their ambitions, their paranoia, and in doing so, they hand you everything. The Machiavellian understands that what people imagine about you is more powerful than what they know. Every ruler in history who lasted mastered this. Churchill paused before he spoke. His silences hit harder than his words. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections for his own discipline, not for admiration. Even today, the CEOs, strategists, and power brokers who actually move markets are the ones who talk the least and listen the most. They know the same rule. The man who speaks least controls the tempo of the room. Charisma fades. Applause dies. But a quiet mind, unreadable and composed, is unbreakable. Machiavelli saw that clearly. The louder man always burns out. The patient one endures. So ask yourself, what happens when you stop performing? When you no longer explain yourself, no longer post your plans, no longer chase acknowledgement? You gain something that can't be faked. Space. Space to move how you want. Space to think in peace. Space to act without permission. And while others are busy narrating their every thought, you're already in motion. They'll start whispering about you. They'll analyze, guess, speculate, and while they talk, you advance. That's real power. The ability to move while others are still forming opinions. Machiavelli wrote that to rule without resistance, one must remove the need to be seen. Let the masses chase the spotlight. Let them drain themselves, proving they exist. You operate in the architecture behind the stage, the place where strings are pulled, not where applause is heard. And when your work finally emerges, they'll call it sudden, overnight, miraculous, but you'll know it was methodical, invisible, inevitable. They'll ask, how did he do it? And the answer will be the same as it's always been. You didn't show your hand until the game was over. That's the shadow game, the art of controlling perception through absence. You don't vanish. You choose when and how to appear. You don't seek mystery. You engineer it. You let others think they're watching you while you quietly rewrite the map beneath their feet. This is not cowardice. It's craftsmanship. You are crafting the illusion that gives you time, advantage, and psychological dominance. Because once you are predictable, you're controllable. But as long as people can't quite define you, they have to respect you. They have to pause before acting against you. And in that pause lies your leverage. So stay disciplined. Build your silence like a fortress. Let them underestimate you. Let them fill the gaps with fantasy. And when the moment finally comes to reveal what you've built, make sure it's too late for them to stop it. That's not just strategy. That's survival. Every empire that lasted was built by people who knew when to speak and when to vanish. The fall of every great power, every ruler, every genius followed the same rhythm. They became too visible, too soon, too often. They mistook recognition for strength. Machiavelli understood this fatal pattern. Power, like gold, loses value when it floods the market. When you constantly show yourself, your thoughts, your ambitions, you become common currency, easy to trade, easy to spend, easy to discard. The man who floods the world with his presence becomes background noise, but the man who withholds, who appears only when it serves his design, becomes unforgettable. That's the true paradox of strength. What people can't see shapes them more than what they can. When they can predict you, they prepare for you. When they can't, they freeze. That hesitation, that split second of uncertainty, is where power lives. Machiavelli warned that rulers must learn not to be good, not in the moral sense, but in the sense of not being accessible. A ruler should be known by his impact, not his explanations. Felt, not followed. His absence should weigh on the room more than another man's presence. That gravity can't be built through noise. It's built through restraint. Look at the actors who command a stage without a word, a glance, a pause, a controlled silence. That moment pulls the entire audience inward. It's not performance. It's tension. Tension created by holding back. The same applies to life. The person who can pause longer, who can speak last, who can resist the need to justify, that person holds the tempo. In every interaction, noise is liability. Emotion is liability. The hunger to be admired is the most dangerous liability of all. Because once you need validation, you'll distort your actions to get it. You'll trade your edge for approval, your precision for performance. The silent strategist has no such weakness. He doesn't seek applause. He seeks results. He builds without advertising, plans without posting, strikes without warning. By the time others realize what he's done, the move is already irreversible. They call it genius. It's not. It's patience, silence, control. And that kind of control terrifies people, because they can't prepare for what they can't predict. They can't fight what they can't see. They can't defeat what never announces itself. That's the essence of psychological power, to make others react to your silence more than you ever react to their noise. The modern world doesn't reward that kind of man, not at first. It rewards exposure. It celebrates over-explanation. It confuses performance with progress. But in the long run, noise burns out. Silence endures. The showman exhausts himself keeping attention. The strategist conserves energy for the strike. That's why Machiavelli would tell you, be feared, not for cruelty, but for control. The most respected figures in any era share one trait, unreadability. You never know exactly what they're thinking, and that uncertainty commands deference. It's the art of the shadow, visible enough to be real, distant enough to be untouchable. So the next time you feel the urge to post, to prove, to announce, stop, ask yourself, does this serve the mission or just my ego? Who benefits from this display? Me, or the ones waiting to use it against me? Because every reveal is a gift to your rivals. Every confession is a coordinate they can use. You owe the world results, not narration. Effectiveness, not exposure. The magician doesn't explain the trick. He performs it once, perfectly. That's power. You don't need to be famous, followed, or praised. You need to be effective. And effectiveness begins the moment you stop chasing attention. The moment you walk away from the spotlight and into the shadows, not to hide, but to build. You speak rarely, but with weight. You move quietly, but with impact. You stop announcing your worth and start proving it in silence. Because when your silence is louder than their noise, you've already won. When your actions echo in rooms you never entered, you've already won. When people realize they've been reacting to your moves without ever hearing your plans, you've already won. That is the quiet victory Machiavelli lived for. The victory of control over chaos. The victory of motion over noise. The victory of the unseen over the overexposed. So build quietly. Move precisely. Speak rarely. Let your stillness disturb them. Let your results explain what your mouth never needed to. Because the man who masters silence doesn't just win, he lasts.